Hi everyone, it's Kathy, and I'm here today to share a card that I created using stamps from Paperie Ink. And this is sort of a review type of video because this is the first stamp set that I've ever purchased from this company, and it is in no way sponsored by Paperie Ink. But I did want to share with you what my initial thoughts were with these stamps. I started out with a piece of Cougar Super Smooth cardstock, and it is cut to 4 1/4 by 5 1/2. I will almost always start out with a piece of cardstock that size, and then eventually I cut it down, which you will see later on in this video. Anyway, I took the little hexagon stamp and the solid stamp, and I stamped it randomly down the right side using Tiara ink from Catherine Pooler. So this is the very first time that I have used the hexagon stamp, and usually with clear stamps, when they're solid like that, it's pretty hard to get a good impression the first time you use them, unless you season the stamp. And I gotta tell you, I was really impressed with how crisp and clean that the solid hexagon stamp came out with. I mean, just right out of the gate. And I'm pretty sure that the Catherine Pooler ink had something to do with that as well, because her inks are really good for solid types of stamps. Once I was done with that, I did bring in the dotted outline of the little hexagon, and I used VersaFine Onyx black ink to stamp that. Because it was such a fine detail image, I wanted to make sure that I had the proper ink to get the nice crisp clean detail when I stamped it. These stamps were really very easy to line up. I obviously didn't use a positioner, I just eyeballed it. And again, totally impressed with how well they stamped out, so crisp and clean. Next, I moved on and I stamped the little bees with my Favorite Things Extreme Black Hybrid ink because I want to do some Copic coloring. And I noticed that on the very top bee, I kind of stamped him too far over that little hexagon, so I stamped him a second time onto a small scrap so that I could color him, and then I'll fussy cut him out. So my initial reaction with stamping the bees using a completely different type of ink, the My Favorite Things Extreme Black Hybrid ink, awesome. These stamps are made so well and they're such high quality that I was a little nervous about stamping directly on that panel at first without using a positioner, but they just stamped beautifully. So we're going to move on to how I colored in these little bees, but I just want to say one last time that these stamps, the quality is like top notch. I really like them, and I will absolutely be purchasing more. Anyway, I'll make sure to have everything that I use listed in the description box below, and I'll also list out the Copic markers that I used. So the coloring for the bees is really very simple. For the black stripes, I used BV25 and BV23. I concentrated the darker color on the outside of the bees and then blended towards the center of their little bodies so that I could have a center highlight. For their faces and the yellow stripes, I used Y19 and Y08. And again, I concentrated the Y19 on the outer edges of their stripes and used the Y08 to finish coloring in the stripes, maintaining that center highlight. For their little faces, I did concentrate the Y19 on the outer edges of their face and then like along the bottom right above the first black stripe. And then I made sure to leave a center highlight, and filled that in with the Y08. As I was doing the coloring of the bees on the actual stamped panel with the little hexagons, I did notice that the bee that is flying up was also stamped over the hexagon too much. So I did end up stamping him onto a little scrap of cardstock, and I colored him off screen because I colored him the same way. For their wings, I just colored them very quickly with BG10 and BG00. And for the bee whose wings are actually on his back, I did just color directly over what I had previously colored, just so that his wings would have that transparent look. It did change the color underneath a little bit, but that is what I was going for because I wanted the transparent look of his wings. Anyway, to fussy cut the two little bees that I'm gonna glue on top of the others on the stamped panel, I did cut right up against the stamped line, and I didn't bother trying to go around their little stingers or their little antennae. I just cut those off because I have them already stamped down. I did go around the edge with a water-based marker just to clean up some of those cut lines. And a trick when using a marker to go around the edges like that, you want to make sure that the colored side is away from you, so the back side of the stamped image is facing your body. Because if the marker slips, it'll slip and go down the back, and then it won't ruin all of the coloring that you did on the front. So after I had those images cut out and I did go around the edges with the marker on both of them, I just used my Tombow mono liquid glue and adhered those into place. Next, I grabbed my Wonky stitched rectangle dies from Whimsy Stamps and placed that over the area where I wanted to die cut them. I did want to have a nice stitched border around, and I thought that the wonky stitching would be really fun to go with the little buzzy trails and everything. I had also trimmed down a piece of black cardstock just slightly larger than that rectangle panel. Then I put my stamped panel into my MISTI so I could stamp my sentiment. For my sentiment, I used VersaFine Onyx black ink, and I really did not need to stamp that sentiment twice. I guess it's a habit for me to do it, but again, first time, and it stamped really clear and really very nice. Anyway, I adhered the stamped panel to the piece of black cardstock that I had trimmed down that's just slightly larger. And I had also cut a piece of patterned cardstock from My Favorite Things down to 4 by 5 1/4. I adhered that on top of a piece of black cardstock that is, again, slightly larger. It's about 4 1/8 by 5 3/8. I adhered that panel to the front of a top folding A2 size note card. I put a whole bunch of foam tape on the back side of the stamped panel and pressed that into place. And for finishing touches, I added a little bit of glitter to their wings with my Stella glitter pen. And then to add just a little bit more dimension to the bees, I did use a black glaze pen and did a little dot on their antennae and also over their little eyes. And for final embellishment, I dug through my stash and pulled out some little black flower sequins and adhered those with my liquid glue as well. And that's it. That finishes up my card for today. Thank you so much for joining me. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. If you've not yet subscribed, I'd love it if you would. And don't forget to ring the bell so you're notified every time a new video is posted. Thanks again, and we'll see you next time.